My name is Lara, and turning 30 wasn't supposed to feel like standing in the middle of an empty stage after the audience has gone home. I had always believed that milestones carried weight, that your people showed up for you, if only with a gesture, a call, a flicker of warmth. But on the morning of my 30th birthday, the only thing waiting for me was silence. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy, suffocating sort that wraps around your ribs and squeezes. I didn't expect a parade. My expectations have never been extravagant. A text from mom, a quick call from my sister, maybe even one of my father's clipped, formal emails. Something. Because even in a fractured family, you'd think birthdays still counted. But the universe handed me a blank screen, and I tried to pretend it didn't sting. I made my way downstairs expecting to find someone, anyone, at home. Instead I found stillness. My parents' room was spotless, bedsheets tucked with military precision. My sister's room was the same, empty, untouched, lifeless. As if someone had pressed pause and removed all signs of them. First I tried reasoning with myself. Maybe they had a last-minute trip. Maybe they went to visit relatives. Maybe they'd left early and would return with cake or food or something. Anything that made this morning make sense. But as the day dragged on, reality sank its teeth in. They hadn't forgotten my birthday. They had gone somewhere, all three of them without telling me. Work became my distraction. I buried myself in debugging code for my newest indie game, losing track of the hours, grasping at productivity the way someone grabs a lifeline. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt, and every time it wasn't them, it dropped again. By evening I gave up pretending. I ate cold pizza straight from the box, standing alone in the kitchen like a ghost haunting the place I paid to maintain. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a museum curated by people who never intended for me to belong in the first place. And then I made the worst mistake you can make on a day you already feel abandoned. I opened social media. A distant aunt had shared a post from my mother, and the picture hit me like a slap. Perfect tropical beach. White sand, sunlight that looked painted on, and the three of them, my parents and my sister, posing like the cover of a vacation magazine. And, smiling, radiant, complete. Tahiti. They had flown over 6,000 miles to celebrate the day I turned 30, but not with me. Without me. The caption. Best family vacation. Blessed to be here with my wonderful husband and daughter. Daughter. Singular. My chest tightened as though someone had hooked their fingers inside my ribs and pulled. But it was the comment below that shattered me. A business associate of my father wrote, "A wonderful day for a wonderful family. A wonderful family. Complete family. A family that did not include me." And in that instant, something inside me cracked in a way that didn't make noise. Private, quiet breaking, the kind that changes you forever. I stared at their smiling faces and realized I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded. And that was so much worse. For the first time in my life, I understood the truth. I wasn't the overlooked daughter. I was the outsider. But the real shock was still waiting. Only a single word away. Because the moment I typed "why" under their vacation photo, I had no idea my father would reply with 6 words that would burn my entire world to his "why" comment sat beneath their photo like an exposed nerve. Just one word, why. It wasn't clever. It wasn't dramatic. It was raw honesty from someone who had finally run out of excuses for other people's cruelty. For a moment I panicked. My father despised public mess. He cared about reputation the way fish care about water. And I had just put a crack right through the polished shell of his perfect family narrative. I flipped my phone face down and walked away from it. I needed a minute. Maybe an hour. Maybe a new life. I poured a glass of water, my hands trembling so badly some spilled onto the counter. I could almost hear my father's voice in my mind. "Compose yourself, Lara. There's no need for all that emotion." Emotion to him was embarrassing. A stain he refused to have on his shirt sleeve. The house creaked the same way it always did, but tonight those creaks felt louder, like the walls themselves were waiting for the fallout. When my phone finally buzzed, the sound felt like a gunshot. My breath stalled. I walked back to the living room, dread curling around my ankles like smoke. The notification banner glowed at the top of the screen. "Alistair replied to your comment." Not a call. Not a message. Public reply. Tapped it. The post reopened, the bright tropical scene burning my eyes, and right under my small, fragile "why" was my father's answer. 6 words that cleaved something inside me in two. We didn't want to waste our time on a clown. 6 words. 6 nails hammered into the coffin of the daughter he never really wanted. I read it once, then again. My pulse thudded in my ears, drowning out everything around me. There was no misinterpretation, no hidden meaning, no alcohol-fueled lapse. He typed it on vacation under a warm sky, probably holding a drink with a stupid little umbrella in it. He meant it. He meant every letter. He didn't call me dramatic, lazy, difficult. He labeled me a clown, the family's entertainment, the background noise, the extra who doesn't belong on the main stage. And he did it publicly. Not because he slipped, because he wanted it to be known. He wanted his colleagues, his friends, his world to understand. Lara wasn't worth the effort. Lara wasn't one of them. Lara wasn't family. Pain didn't even begin to describe what washed over me. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't fiery. It was cold, easy. Like someone whispered a truth I had somehow ignored for years. I wasn't invisible. I was disposable. Something inside me crystallized. The ache transformed, hardening into something sharp and resolute. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking under his words. I was seeing them clearly. He finally said what he had always shown. I was never a daughter. Just furniture. Just labor. Just background. But if he wanted a clown, then he should have remembered something important. A clown always knows how to give a finale that no one forgets. My fingers steadied, almost eerily calm, as I typed my reply beneath his comment. Surprise waiting for you. Hit post. Then blocked them all. And for the first time since childhood, the silence around me felt empowering instead of lonely. But the real surprise wasn't the comment I left him. It was the one thing none of them ever imagined. The house they lived in wasn't even theirs to begin with. Because while they were partying across the world, they had forgotten one tiny detail. They were living under my roof, and I had finally decided to stop being their unpaid landlord. When I say the house was mine, people often assume I'm speaking metaphorically, like I paid more bills or did more chores. Well, I mean literally mine, down to the deed and the last legal dot of ink. The irony. My family had spent years parading this house as a symbol of their stability, their prestige, their success. Parties, dinners, career celebrations. They took ownership of everything except the truth. And the truth began with my grandmother, Elena. She wasn't like the rest of them. Where my father saw the world in contracts and power, my grandmother saw it in color, texture, and possibility. Her hands always smelled faintly of turpentine and lavender, and she alone treated my love for game development like something sacred instead of something shameful. She'd ask me about storylines and character arcs the way others might inquire about medical school or law internships. She saw me in a way nobody else ever had. When she died 3 years ago, the grief crushed me. But the true shock came later, in the lawyer's office, where the air tasted like dust and old paperwork. Her assets were divided equally between me and my sister. My parents looked almost bored. Of course the money would go their way through Kasia eventually. But then the lawyer cleared his throat and unfolded a separate sheet. The property at 127 Willow Creek Lane is left entirely to my granddaughter Lara. The room froze. My mother's hand flew to her throat. My father's jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grind. Even Kasia blinked like someone had splashed cold water on her face. But the lawyer wasn't finished. He read a handwritten note. A home should be a refuge to the one who needs it most. Lara, may this house always protect the fire inside you. Never let them convince you you're just passing through. I remembered my grandmother's gentle smile, the way she brushed my hair from my face and said, "Don't shrink to fit someone else's story, sweetheart. Build your own." My parents fought it, of course. My father raged, insisting I sign the deed over to him, as the rightful head of the family. But for once I didn't fold. "No," was all I said. And the will was airtight. Legally, morally, spiritually, the house was mine. For 3 years they lived here as though it was their birthright, ignoring the truth because it didn't fit into their carefully styled world. I paid the property taxes. I covered the homeowner's insurance. I even repaired the roof one winter while my father lectured me about responsibility, from the comfort of the living room. They treated me like a ghost, and expected me to thank them for the privilege. But now, walking through the quiet hallways, I heard my grandmother's voice as clearly as if she were beside me. A house is only a home when someone is brave enough to claim it. That night I sat at my desk, the same one Grandma once leaned on as she asked about my games, and dialed a number I had saved for a year but never used. A real estate lawyer. My voice didn't shake. Not this time. "Hello, my name is Lara," I said. "I need to start the process for a formal eviction. After that, I want to discuss listing the property. Not revenge. Not rage. Just liberation." For the first time in my life, the next chapter belonged completely to me. But I had no idea how explosive the fallout would be when they walked through that front door after Tahiti, and found a stranger waiting with legal papers in hand. My family returned from Tahiti on a Tuesday night, sunburned, relaxed, dragging their glossy luggage across the hardwood floor as if they were returning from a royal tour. I heard them from my office upstairs. Their laughter floated through the house, light and careless, completely unaware of the storm waiting for them. They hadn't bothered to check their messages, of course. Not one of them had noticed they were blocked. Not one of them realized the stage they had built so proudly was about to be dismantled plank by plank. For 2 days I avoided them. I moved like a ghost, quick and silent, my presence barely noticeable unless I wanted it to be. They assumed I was sulking. They thought my quietness was just another childish overreaction they didn't need to take seriously. If only they knew. On the morning the eviction notice was scheduled to arrive, I left the house early and spent hours in a nearby cafe, nursing a lukewarm latte until it tasted like disappointment. My lawyer advised me not to be home when the papers were delivered. So I waited, checking my phone every few minutes even though the process server wasn't required to notify me. Around 3 in the afternoon I returned home. The instant I stepped through the door I felt it, an electric tension in the air, thick enough to touch. This wasn't the ordinary uncomfortable silence I'd grown up with. This was something new. On the entryway table lay a white envelope. Heavy, official, unmistakable. Even without touching it, I knew they had already opened it. I walked upstairs before anyone noticed me, but I didn't make it far. The pounding on my bedroom door came quick, frantic and loud. "Lara, open the door right now." Esha. Her voice wasn't irritated this time. It was cracking, high-pitched, almost panicked. "Open the door." She stood there red-faced, hair wild, gripping the eviction notice so tightly the edges had torn. Behind her, my mother hovered with swollen eyes, wringing her hands like someone awaiting a medical diagnosis. At the bottom of the stairs stood my father, arms crossed, jaw clenched, trying to appear in control even as the ground shifted beneath him. "What is this?" Kasia shrieked, shoving the paper toward me. "Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me this is some sick joke." "It's not a joke," I said calmly. "It's a legal notice. You have 30 days to vacate the property." Her eyes bulged. "Vacate. Vacate. This is my home. I grew up here. You grew up living in Grandma's house," I corrected. "Now it's mine." My mother stumbled forward, voice trembling. "Sweetheart, your father, everyone is confused. You would throw us out of our home." "My home," I repeated. "And yes." At that moment my father stormed up the stairs, his voice a thundercloud about to burst. "That's enough." He jabbed a finger at me. "You will call your lawyer and retract this. You will stop this nonsense. I will not let you destroy this family because you're having a fit over a vacation." Fit. That was all my pain amounted to in his eyes. "Dad," I said quietly, "this isn't about a trip. This is about years of pretending I didn't exist." His nostrils flared. "We gave you a roof over your head." "No." I stepped closer. "You lived under my roof. And you treated me like an unwanted tenant the entire time." The hallway fell silent. For the first time in my life, I watched realization hit all 3 of them like a tidal wave. Not only had they underestimated me, they had built their entire lives on land that was never theirs. My father's voice dropped, trembling with a rare and unfamiliar fear. "Lara, please. We're family." That word meant nothing coming from him. "Not anymore." "You have 30 days, I said. Then I closed the door. Gently, quietly. The sound echoed like the final click of a lock sealing shut. But the real storm came later, when they realized there was nothing they could say, threaten, or bargain that would stop me, and the house itself would soon carry a "for sale" sign right in front of their faces. The days that followed were a surreal blend of silence, tension, and pathetic attempts at manipulation. My family moved through the house like ghosts, but not serene ones. more like restless spirits desperately clinging to a place they no longer had permission to haunt. They didn't understand that the version of me they were familiar with, the quiet daughter, the convenient doormat, was gone. Something had cracked open, and they couldn't put it back together. My mother tried first. Her approach was predictable, guilt wrapped in motherly concern. Every morning, she left a tray of food outside my door, meals she thought were my favorites from childhood. The gesture might have tugged at my heart once, but now it felt like a bandage slapped on a wound she had ignored for decades. I picked up the plates, set them in the kitchen untouched, and walked away. Kasia oscillated between rage and desperation. She sent long messages, voice notes, even old photos. One minute she called me heartless. The next she reminisced about the rare moments we had actually gotten along, trying to use nostalgia as a lifeline. None of it worked. As for my father, he went through 3 phases: intimidation, legal threats, and booming phone calls from his lawyer friend. Negotiation, trying to broker peace, as if this were a business dispute. Desperation, a quiet plea on the staircase, voice trembling with fear he didn't bother to hide. But I wasn't the old Lara anymore, the one who bent herself into impossible shapes to keep them comfortable. Every message, every voicemail, every guilt trip was relayed to my real lawyer, Mr. Davies. He handled them with the efficiency of someone taking out the trash. 7 days before the deadline, the for sale sign was hammered into the lawn. Genevieve cried for nearly an hour. I didn't watch. I heard her from my office, her sobbing echoing through the hallways like a soundtrack to a life I was no longer willing to participate in. I didn't hate her, not even now. I simply saw her clearly for the first time. A woman who had chosen the comfort of conformity over the discomfort of loving both her daughters equally. My sympathy, however, ended there. On the final day, the sky was gray, heavy clouds pressing low, as though the universe wanted to match the mood. They were still packing at the last minute, their panic rising with every box. Their new rental wasn't glamorous, wasn't impressive, wasn't what they were used to. It was simply what they could afford without my stability holding them up. I stayed upstairs until their things were piled in the entryway. When I finally walked down, all 3 stood in the empty foyer like actors waiting for a spotlight that would never shine on them again. Alistair looked old. The fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by something hollow. "I hope you're proud of yourself," he said, voice brittle. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I replied softly. "I simply stepped out of the role you cast me in." Kasia hugged herself, refusing to meet my eyes. The confident doctor, the golden child, now looked like someone unsure of her own footing for the first time. My mother approached last, wiping her cheeks. "Lara, will we ever be a family again?" I held her gaze, searching for any sign of genuine remorse. There was none. Only fear. Only loss. Only confusion. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But if we ever rebuild anything, it won't start here." Their shoulders sagged under the finality of that sentence. They walked out together, slow, defeated, and strangely small. They didn't look back. The door closed with a soft but absolute click. For the first time, the silence in the house didn't press against my chest. It opened something in me. The space was empty, but I felt full. But what came next, the sale of the house, my new life, and the studio I built from the ashes, would prove that walking away wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of the life they never believed I could create. The house sold faster than anyone, including me, expected. Within 3 weeks, I had multiple offers, most of them higher than the listing price. People loved the crown molding, the open staircase, the oversized windows that caught the morning light like they were designed for it. Funny, really. My family always bragged about how this house was their pride, their home, their legacy. Turned out the only reason it survived long enough to shine was because I held it together, paid the taxes, handled the repairs, kept the walls from caving in. Letting it go wasn't bittersweet. It was freeing. I watched the final buyer's signatures glide across the closing documents, and as soon as the last pen stroke dried, a weight I didn't even know I was carrying slid off my shoulders. It wasn't just the house I had sold, it was the history attached to it. The years of being overlooked, the unpaid emotional labor, the quiet suffering behind closed doors. With the money, I bought a bright, sun-filled loft downtown. Exposed brick, sprawling windows, industrial beams. Raw and honest, the kind of place that welcomes creativity instead of suffocating it. I filled it with plants, art, books, soft rugs, mismatched mugs. Things that never had a place in my old house because they didn't fit the aesthetic my parents curated. This time, everything fit because it was finally my taste, my life, my rules. The rest of the money went into the dream I'd quietly nurtured since childhood. My own game development studio. A real one. With a real team. Real equipment. Real possibilities. I hired 3 young developers. Talented, eager, hungry for the kind of stories I wanted to bring into the world. We brainstormed late into the evenings, fueled by takeout and contagious excitement. Our studio didn't look like much. A converted warehouse space with twinkling lights and scuffed floors, but it felt more like home than the house I'd grown up and ever had. And slowly, something incredible happened. Began to heal. Not in a dramatic, suddenly and fixed way, but in the small ways that matter. I woke up excited instead of anxious. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I created without fear of someone mocking my work. I laughed. Real laughter, not the quiet, polite version my parents preferred. Freedom has a sound. Mine was the clacking of keyboards, the rustle of sketch paper, and the hum of possibility under every keystroke. As for my family, we didn't speak for months. I knew they were out there, stewing in their own shock, adjusting to their new life without a free home and a convenient scapegoat. Maybe they blamed me. Maybe they told their friends false stories to protect their pride. Maybe they finally realized that unconditional love only works when it flows both ways. One afternoon in my studio, months after the eviction, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line read only, "Are you doing okay?" It was from my mother. 5 words. 5 small words. But for once, they weren't about herself. They weren't followed by demands or guilt or expectations. I didn't reply right away. Healing takes time. And forgiveness, if it ever comes, won't arrive through a single email. But I didn't delete it. Because for the first time ever, they were the ones standing outside the door, waiting. And I was finally the one who got to choose whether to open it. My life didn't fall apart when they left. Finally began. So if you've ever been made to feel like the clown in your own family, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever do is walk off their stage and start building your own.